A reading from the book of Leviticus. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "If someone has on his skin a scab or a pustule or blotch, which appears to be the sore of leprosy, he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of the priests among his descendants. If the man is leprous and unclean, the priest shall declare him unclean by reason of the sore on his head. The one who bears the sore of leprosy shall keep his garments rent and his head bare, and shall muffle his beard. He shall cry out, 'Unclean, unclean!' As long as the sore is on him, he shall declare himself unclean, since he is in fact unclean. He shall dwell apart, making his abode outside the camp." The word of the Lord. Last night, while I was watching the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, I noticed the athletes had a lot of joy. They were coming in with their flags and there among the ceremony and the lights and the dancers there at the opening ceremonies, and they had a lot of joy with their flags. And there were a lot of countries there. There was even Lebanon there at the opening ceremony. And I noticed the desire that these athletes had, that they had the desire to belong. These great athletes doing the Olympics have health. And moving to the other end of the spectrum, let us look at some people who don't have as much health, who are in poor health, the leper here in this reading. Now they have this natural desire just as fervently to belong. I would say that's probably the most painful part of being a leper here in this reading, is that estrangement, that being set aside outside the camp. Like imagine if you're one who is sick and having this read to you. As long as the sore is on him, he shall declare himself unclean. Since he is in fact unclean, he shall dwell apart, making his abode outside the camp. How painful would that be to read and have that read to you? Leprosy itself is a slow-growing bacterial infection in the body that affects the nerves. So one of the things that affects lepers is that they get numb in their hands and in their extremities, and actually the daily abuse of just running into things and not being able to correct it with the pain network actually causes a lot of damage to people with leprosy. And so that points to the beauty of the network of pain that helps us to navigate the world, but it also shows part of the disease, part of the destruction of that not being able to have that sense. So in a way, leprosy is a disease of numbness. But the pain that comes from being alienated from the camp is felt very strongly. In the gospel we hear today, actually tomorrow, we have the story of a leper asking Jesus, "If you wish, you can make me clean." Jesus, moved with pity, touched him and said, "I do will it. Be made clean." Notice the language the leper uses. He doesn't say, "Lord, make me well. Lord, heal my wounds." He says, "Lord, make me clean." The leper had a desire to join back with the community, to receive the prescription of Moses for cleansing, to rejoin his brothers and sisters. This idea of being cleansed reminded me of an experience growing up at camp when I was a kid. Maybe at 12 years old, I went to a camp, Franke Day Camp in Indiana with my cousins. And I went there and I remember sitting there with my cousin, getting really excited about this thing we got to do at the end of the week. So on Friday, we got to do the mudslide. So the mudslide was this really fun slide, basically. So the counselors had dug out on a hill this tube that was kind of like a luge tube, and they would sit there with buckets with water and pour it down the slide. So you're just going down, and as you got more and more water, you got just a giant mess of water and mud at the bottom of the slide that you go, and you'd be completely soaked and full of dirt. And I was thinking, doing that alone wouldn't actually be that fun. I mean, you'd sit there at the end and be saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm just like wet and muddy." But the part of that which made it fun was being able to look at my cousin, and say like, "Dude, like, do you see that? Like, we're so muddy," and that was part of it. Was that experience of being able to share that with somebody else, that community. And really, that's what we see in the gospel. This need to belong in the community. This need to belong to each other. So as we reflect on this, we're about to go into the season of Lent. We're about to go into Lent in a time of solitude, in a time when we go out into the desert alone. In some ways, we face ourselves, our temptations, and our own sinfulness. As we seek healing and cry out, "A clean heart create for me, O God. Renew within me a steadfast spirit." It's important to note that we don't go out into the desert to get the strength to be able to take on the spiritual life by ourselves. We go out into the desert alone to realize that we belong to one another, that we need each other as brothers and sisters. As Mother Teresa reminds us, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to one another. Christ wants to wash us. Christ wants us to be whole. When Jesus heals, He gives us the opportunity to be joined in the community. Let us rejoice that we find belonging in Christ and in each other. And let us also be sensitive to those who feel alone, estranged, unwanted. And to sum this up, let us reflect on the quote from the first letter of John. "For if we say we have fellowship with Him while we still walk in darkness, we lie and do not act in truth. But if we walk in the light as He is in the light, then we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of His Son Jesus cleanses us from all sin."